The rivalry between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals just got way more personal. After Trey Hendrickson officially arrived in Baltimore, Joe Burrow finally broke his silence. And the message he sent to the Ravens is getting attention all across the NFL. But here's the craziest part of this whole story. Burrow now has to face a player who knows the Bengals' offense inside and out. And once you hear what he said about the Ravens, about Lamar Jackson, and about facing Hendrickson for the first time, you'll understand why this rivalry could absolutely explode this season. Joe Burrow made one thing very clear. Games against the Baltimore Ravens are not just another matchup on the schedule. When he was asked about facing Baltimore again this season, he basically admitted these games are circled on the calendar from day one. His quote immediately stood out. Anytime we play the Ravens, that one is circled. And honestly, that tells you everything about the level of respect and pressure the Ravens bring inside the AFC North right now. Burrow also talked about Lamar Jackson and reminded everyone this rivalry has been building for years. He said that's always a battle when we get after it. You can tell there's real respect between the two quarterbacks, but there's also that constant desire to prove who owns the division. And in my opinion, that's exactly why Ravens versus Bengals feels different from most NFL rivalries. The energy always feels heavier. The games feel more intense. What I find interesting is how much Burrow seems to embrace that pressure. He talks about these matchups like someone who truly believes he can go toe-to-toe with Baltimore every single time. But at the same time, the Ravens continue to be one of the most physical and punishing teams in football, especially when their defense starts controlling the game. And now that defense has even more reason to make life miserable for opposing quarterbacks. Because on top of dealing with Lamar and the intensity of Baltimore, Burrow now has to face a player who knows the Bengals' offense extremely well, and who just arrived in Baltimore looking to make this rivalry even more personal. The arrival of Trey Hendrickson in Baltimore completely changed the feel of this rivalry. And honestly, I think this move affected Cincinnati way more than they want to admit. Because we're not talking about just any pass rusher here. We're talking about a defender who knows the Bengals' offensive system, understands their tendencies, and most importantly, knows exactly how Joe Burrow likes to play. When Burrow was asked about Hendrickson signing with Baltimore, he tried to play it cool, but his answer definitely stood out. He said, "Not very surprising. I know Trey. I love Trey. I just know how he operates." To me, that sounded a lot more like someone trying to downplay the situation than someone who's actually comfortable with it. Because now Cincinnati has to face an elite pass rusher twice a year, and one who's probably coming into those games with extra motivation against his former team. And let's be real here. Hendrickson didn't choose Baltimore by accident. The Ravens were looking to add more aggression to their defensive front after missing out on Max Crosby. So when the opportunity came to land an experienced, explosive pass rusher directly from a division rival, Baltimore moved fast. In my opinion, this was an incredibly smart move by the Ravens because they didn't just improve their defense, they weakened a direct AFC North competitor at the same time. The dangerous part is that Hendrickson is arriving with that mindset of a player who feels like he has something to prove. Cincinnati clearly wasn't willing to pay what he wanted, and situations like that usually become fuel in the NFL. So just imagine the intensity when he lines up across from Burrow for the first time, wearing a Ravens uniform. That has all the ingredients to make these matchups way more physical, emotional, and personal this season. One of the most interesting moments from Burrow's interview came when he was asked what it'll be like facing Trey Hendrickson this season. His answer was short but very telling. "That'll definitely be fun. But honestly, I think even Burrow knows it's going to feel a lot less fun once the Ravens' defense starts bringing real pressure, because there's a huge difference between facing a random pass rusher and facing someone who practiced against your offensive line every single day for years. Hendrickson knows the weak spots in that offense. He understands how Burrow likes to move in the pocket, knows the timing of certain plays, and probably already has a feel for some of Cincinnati's tendencies in key situations. That gives Baltimore a very dangerous advantage in these matchups, and if there's one thing the Ravens have always done well, it's turning defensive pressure into complete chaos for opposing quarterbacks. Once Baltimore starts dialing up blitzes, closing running lanes, and hitting the quarterback consistently, games can change fast. In my opinion, Hendrickson joining this defensive system could make the Ravens even more aggressive on third downs and in critical moments. And that's exactly the kind of environment that could create serious problems for Cincinnati this year. The thing is, Burrow is clearly trying to enter this rivalry without showing any concern. But on the other side, there's now a Ravens defense that looks even more prepared to attack the biggest weakness of the Bengals, quarterback protection. And when you combine a division rivalry, constant pressure, and a former teammate looking to prove himself, these games instantly go to another level. For a while, a lot of people believed the Ravens were going to make a huge move for Max Crosby, but the trade never happened. And honestly, I think Baltimore responded in the best way possible by going after Trey Hendrickson right after that. The Ravens didn't sit around waiting for a solution to magically appear. They reacted immediately. The contract proves exactly how serious they were. Hendrickson signed a 4-year, $112 million deal with $60 million fully guaranteed. In other words, Baltimore didn't bring him in as just another rotational piece. The Ravens see Hendrickson as someone capable of changing the entire impact of this defense right away. And when you look at his history of pressuring quarterbacks, it's easy to understand why Baltimore invested so heavily. In my opinion, the scariest part for the rest of the league is imagining Hendrickson inside the Ravens' defensive identity. Baltimore is already one of the most physical, aggressive, and uncomfortable teams to face in football. Now add an experienced pass rusher who's motivated and used to delivering in big moments. That combination could turn the Ravens' defense into one of the most dangerous units in the NFL again, especially inside the division. And honestly, I think the Bengals realize that too. There's a massive difference between facing the usual tough Ravens defense and facing a Baltimore team that just added a defender determined to punish his former franchise. The more personal this rivalry becomes, the more these games start feeling like playoff matchups before the playoffs even begin. If you're enjoying this breakdown, smash that like button to help the purple flock grow. There's one detail in this story that a lot of people might be overlooking: health. Both Joe Burrow and Trey Hendrickson are coming off physically difficult seasons. Burrow dealt with a serious toe injury last year that kept him sidelined for a long stretch. Hendrickson only played 7 games before needing surgery. So there's definitely real concern on both sides heading into these matchups. Even so, when Burrow returned against the Ravens last season, you could immediately feel how much these games raised the intensity level for Cincinnati. The Bengals beat Baltimore 32-14 on Thanksgiving, but then the Ravens answered with a dominant 24-0 shutout just weeks later. And to me, that perfectly sums up this rivalry right now. Nobody stays comfortable for very long. One game completely changes the tone of the next one. Now these teams are set to face each other again in huge moments of the season, first in October and then again at the end of December. And honestly, I think those games could directly impact who controls the AFC North, because the Ravens and Bengals still look like the two teams most capable of turning division games into full-blown battles from start to finish. But this year there's an extra layer making everything even more dangerous: personal emotion. Burrow already admitted these games are circled on his calendar. Hendrickson is now in Baltimore trying to prove himself against his former team. Lamar is still fighting to keep the Ravens on top of the division. And when you mix rivalry, competitive pride, aggressive defense, and players trying to send a message, you usually end up with some of the most violent and intense games of the entire NFL season. One thing became very clear after hearing Joe Burrow speak. The Ravens are still living in the Bengals' heads before the season even starts. Burrow tried to sound confident the entire time, but the arrival of Trey Hendrickson in Baltimore completely changed the energy of this rivalry. Because the Ravens didn't just improve their defense, they added a player who knows Cincinnati from the inside and is arriving highly motivated to face his former team twice a year. And honestly, I think that makes Baltimore even more dangerous this season. When you combine an aggressive defense, a pass rusher with something to prove, and Lamar Jackson leading the team, it becomes very hard to ignore the kind of problems the Ravens can create for the rest of the AFC North, especially against a Bengals team that already knows every little detail can completely swing this division. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Trey Hendrickson is going to dominate against the Bengals this season? And after hearing Burrow's comments, do you think this rivalry just became even more personal? Let me know in the comments, because I really want to hear what you think about all of this. And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out, and I'll see you in the next video.